Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today we are finally going to be doing another draw with me, as it has been kind of a while, and it's been kind of a while since I've done a Genshin Impact kind of drawing. So yeah, that is what we're going to be doing today. I've been kind of feeling a little bit burnt out from drawing Genshin Impact characters for like draw with me videos, and I feel like partially it's because I always stick with the same kind of format. So sometime in the future, especially when I might do some drawing of characters that I've already drawn in the past, I'm gonna see if I'm gonna break out of limiting myself to the same kind of like format or the same size. Maybe I'll do squares, maybe I'll do some horizontal ones and stuff for future artwork. But for consistency's sake, we are still going to be using kind of like the 5x7 canvas, and I think it's 300 DPI or 350 DPI. So yeah, for the most part, yeah, I kind of cut out a lot of this, but I played around with a few poses because I was kind of attached with the idea of doing kind of a bird's eye view kind of perspective, or like kind of looking down to her or her looking upwards, because I thought it'd be a neat angle to do. But then I was thinking maybe it's not exactly what I would want to do, especially like taking consideration of what I want for the background, because I want the horizon line to be somewhat visible. So I decided that I wasn't gonna do it, and you're gonna see me do a few iterations of sketching out the body. I did cut out a whole portion from the video because, like I said, I was actually going to experiment of doing kind of more of a dynamic pose of her kind of like lunging forward, and I thought it looked better as a more horizontal piece and making it a little bit more almost like cinematic a little bit because of how it's going to be angled and how I would like to do the movement. But I decided against it just for kind of like consistency, but also like I haven't drawn Dehya or Dehya. I do not know how to pronounce her name, so someone please do correct me in the comments if you can. I just lost my train of thought. Yes, I wanted to draw her with kind of more of like an action pose, but I haven't drawn her before, so it's kind of a little bit more easier for me to draw them not too complicated, so that I can kind of like take in their design a little bit more easily. So I did do like one sketch, I think, in my sketchbook just to potentially plan out something, because it'd be more fun to do some characters who wield a claymore to do some poses, because I've done some bow users, I've done sword and some polearm. I think there's something that's very similar to a polearm that I've done, so I have a little bit of experience, but something that's a little bit more weightier, heavier, and just like larger, I think would be more interesting to practice a bit with some action poses and stuff. But for the drawing, I did settle on this pose. Like I said, it's kind of more on the simple side, but I wanted to play around with the lighting just a little bit and with the background. So for the most part, really happy with the drawing. I think it actually looks really pretty, but in the future I definitely want to do some redraws of some characters, not exactly like one-to-one like the redrawing my own fan art series that I had going for a little bit for my Genshin portrait drawings, where I almost drew each piece very similar to how I drew my old versions, just because I thought it would be neat to see the comparison in terms of just kind of like skill level, as well as just like preferences between how my art was maybe like a year or two ago versus now. So we'll see which characters I decide to redraw into some other pieces. There are some characters that I've drawn just because like I like to draw them from the top of my head. I think like Bennett, Barbara. I haven't actually drawn very much Barbara like digitally, so maybe I'll draw her soon. Tinari. Who else is there? Albedo. Kaya I've drawn plenty of times as well in the past. Venti. There's like some I could definitely play around with in terms of like poses and stuff, because I know for the most part anatomy and posing is definitely hard for me, and I think it's because anatomy is just like its whole own battle, I guess. But for the idea of like poses and gestures and like that kind of stuff, I feel like perspective is very much a big part of it, and I feel like I get too intimidated, so I would like to in the future kind of do more of that if I can, which is why you guys see me more or less, like for the most part, block out the body before I actually do my first sketch. Because like in previous videos, I actually would just sketch directly onto the canvas without any kind of like prep work. Sometimes I've done like thumbnailing and stuff in my sketchbook just so that I have a general idea. But I don't know if it's because I'm being a little bit more cautious. I definitely like using kind of like a thicker brush and kind of just planning out the body in general so that I have a little bit of a guideline to just focus on making the character look like the character and adding the clothing and the hair and the movement without worrying about losing the body. Because especially when I draw females, sometimes the males too. Males, I feel like I skew up their shoulders by adding stuff to their shoulders. Like sometimes I lose it. And then for the female, it tends to be the chest area. So sometimes I lose volume or flatten things because they don't appear to be, like the clothing doesn't appear to be sitting on the surface anymore. And I think it's because I lack the ability to remember that there is, something with volume underneath the clothing, like such as like maybe the arms or like for the body and the torso and stuff. So it just helps me get some weight of objects sitting on the body a little bit more correct, and I don't have to worry about it too much when I have just basic guidelines that help with the perspective of the body, or just kind of giving me an indication that remember that there's a body there. So kind of like a little tangent about all of that. But the session for Dehya, I kind of went back and forth a little bit. Like I said, I think maybe it's because I was intimidated. I did run through a lot of issues just trying to make her look like her. So it didn't help that a lot of the iterations of sketches, it was just hard for me to draw her. And I feel like I'm going to have the same issue drawing Beidou in the future. I was actually going to draw Beidou last week, but because things got a little bit busy, I think I did no talking videos, so it was easier for me to edit during the middle of the night. But I would like to tackle and draw Beidou very soon so that we can get her out of the way and kind of check that off my checklist, because she's kind of one of the characters I always really like, but I always feel intimidated in terms of like capturing her essence kind of thing, as well as like making sure she is kind of portrayed more of like a strong-willed character, that kind of demeanor. And I think Dehya kind of has that same vibe to her as Beidou does. So hopefully this gives me a little bit more confidence in the future, but for the most part, I would love to practice drawing more of the Genshin characters once again, probably like on my off time and stuff, because there's some characters that I feel like I just don't draw their character type as much, and I would like to definitely, because I tend to draw more of like the cutesier characters more easily. I feel like not exactly like cutesy as in like Klee and Nahida, but like the mid area characters, some of the males and the females I find a little bit easier to draw. But hopefully I'll be getting back into just drawing Genshin characters in general, because I do kind of miss it. So yeah, if you guys have any suggestions on who you would like me to draw potentially for the next Genshin video, do let me know. Hopefully it'll be a character that I haven't drawn, but I definitely want to do another redraw video, and I'm looking at Thoma or Goro to redraw, or even Ito. But I feel like for actually all three of them, maybe not so much Ito, but for Thoma and Goro, I want to change theirs more or less completely. Theirs was very bare bones. I do think like Diluc and Zhongli were kind of bare bones as well. I know like for Xiao and Kazuha, where I did the redraws as well, had a little bit more, there's like a bit of sense of depth. I think there was like some added effects that made it look a little bit more finished and polished. And I know for Diluc and Zhongli a little bit later, I tried to make it feel like a little bit more finished by adding a little bit of effects. But I believe for like Goro and Thoma, if I look at their old versions, they strictly look like kind of like graduation photo. It's kind of like awkward portrait on somewhat of a flat background. So I would love to draw Thoma in more of a scene, or like a scene like with some kind of background or scenery or something, and same with Goro, and not make it that awkward. Like I think Thoma's doing like a peace sign and Goro's like hands crossed, kind of awkward graduation photo. Not even graduation photo, it's like yearbook photo. That's probably what I'm thinking of. Yeah, So for the drawing process, I had a bit of a hard time thinking of how to do the little armor plate thing. I don't know if this is like a pauldron, but something on her shoulder. And I looked up a model on my phone because some people have like the 3D turnarounds of them. So I decided to use that as a reference so I could see how it sits on the shoulder. So I used that and I made that on a separate layer so that I could sketch it in purple and figure it out and move it if I need to before merging it and changing it back to the same color. So for the most part, I think because I kept it more or less the bust upwards for her drawing, I don't think I took a very good look at her entire outfit. Like I said, like in my sketchbook, I did do one sketch, but it's been a while, so I don't really remember that much. I might do a whole spread of her in my sketchbook because I kind of randomly placed a full body pose between the two spreads of my pages, so I kind of need to fill up the rest of the sides. So I'll probably do that for sure. And in terms of like this week, I think I took this week pretty easy. I think because the majority of my stress went to like store update and stuff. So I definitely took this week more like a break, but I'm hopefully going to be using my time wisely and trying to get ahead with filming. Because for the most part, I spend way too much time finishing up things that I feel like I could have finished up like on the same day, and instead I put it off for the next day, which kind of puts me in a weird area where I'm filming almost like the day or night before I have to upload. So I want to get back into a good pace again, so hopefully I can do that in the future. Not even the future. I want to do it for this week, if that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about the background a little bit before I get too derailed. So for the background, I had a color scheme kind of picked in my brain. I don't remember which drawing I did of a character where I had a similar color scheme for the background, but I remember doing maybe like a desert piece or something like that for someone else, and I do like the color combination of kind of this terracotta-ish brown and kind of more of a brighter sky color where it's kind of, I don't know, it's not quite like super blue, it has like a little bit of a green tinge, and I made it a little bit more purpley up closer to the upper left, and then we'll add a little bit of a softer yellow to the right side so that I can have a bit of an indication of a color, like a lighting source for my color scheme. I also did look up reference of some desert photography because I did want to make sure the sand kind of read a certain way compared to the background, which is why, like, for the most part, I don't think the background looks too awful in terms of the color, because I feel like I'm always a little bit nervous when I use such bright colors for the background because I don't want it to look too unnatural. But luckily, for the most part, I think it turned out all right. I added some cooler shadows into some of the areas, and I'm pretty much going to be blurring a little bit of the background so that it doesn't stand out too much, which also means that I don't have to put too much of details, because if I'm going to blur it, it's not going to appear too much. I added some clouds to the top just to help with a little bit of movement, trying to fill up that blank blue area. Lastly, I wanted to color correct a little bit, and I do that by adding an overlay layer and choosing pretty intense colors, kind of mapping out how I want the colors to look, and then I will slowly dim or like gradually dim the overlay layer so that I can kind of see what kind of intensity that I like. So I kind of left it with this. I did make the sky a little bit more greeny compared to the rest. I think the overall color is pretty much more or less a little bit more warmer than when I initially had it. And I think it's because I wanted to prep it for this kind of lighting, which you guys saw that I added an addition layer to add a little bit of lighting to the right side. And then I made a new layer and we're gonna start to actually color her. So I'm starting off with the skin, and I'm noticing that I didn't like the fact that I was kind of starting with the base tone for her, because usually I would start off with a base color and then gradually build up value and warmth at the same time. But because I know that she was gonna be kind of backlit or kind of lit from a specific lighting source on the side, I thought it'd be easier for me to make everything kind of in more of a mid-tone color so that I can pull out highlights and then just kind of slowly push out some of the shadows, because Sometimes when I do skin, I go a little bit overboard on making things get gradually brighter, or not brighter, more saturated and more warm, so it kind of gets into that weird area. But I do like the simplicity of how I did Dehya's skin here, so kind of a good call, at least for me, because I think visually it looks a little bit better with the minimal highlights rather than me gradually trying to make gradations of shadow. Yeah, I think that's it for the skin for the most part. I am going to add a little bit of a deeper shadow color by making it a little bit more purple, and then we're going to do the hair, and I think the eyes, and then the clothing and everything. So it's just the usual procedure that I usually follow when I work on digital pieces like this. So I just kind of go back and forth trying to make sure things look kind of correct, so we have a little bit less things to fix when we actually start to render and clean up everything. So I'm adding the purple here and there, and it won't look too purple once I add in some of the darker colors anyway, so don't worry about that if you're worried about adding some vibrant colors to just like certain areas, because as long as like other areas share the same color, it won't pop out too much. But also like think about the value a little bit, so that the purple won't stand out, because Dehya's hair is going to be quite dark, and I'm going to lean it a little bit towards like kind of like a dark muted purple anyways, so that it kind of doesn't look too off in terms of my whole color scheme. For the white area, so let's say her teeth and her, I guess her sclera, I don't know what you call it, but the whites of her eyes, I did not use like a pure white. I'm using kind of like almost a dusty grayish yellow color, but it reads quite bright still, because as long as I have some darker color surrounding it, it still reads very bright, which is why I don't think I understand color theory that much, and I feel like it's fun to learn about colors by kind of like trial and error, because a lot of things, especially like color schemes or just colors in general, get affected by other surrounding colors. So it's hard to say like, you know, does a blue and an orange look good solely because they're complementary, or is it because like, you know, you use a particular blue with a certain kind of orange at like a certain intensity and stuff? Because I don't know how to explain it. I'm not like well versed in color theory, nor can I really explain it in a very eloquent way, so apologies about that. There's definitely a lot of good videos out there that talk about color theory and stuff. I do a lot of like trial and error and kind of like building up kind of like a preference to certain colors that I like to use for certain things. Like when I color red objects, I often use purple, a little bit of brown, and maybe like some neutral colors that might act as more of a shadow tone or like reflected light, depending on the color scheme. But yeah, for the most part, treated the hair kind of in a similar way as I usually do. So if I have a indicated kind of light source, I try to make sure that the base tone of the hair is kind of reflected that way already right off from the start. So because the light is coming from the right, I made the right side a lot lighter, and then immediately put the left side in darkness so that I don't forget. Because I think when I was younger, or even just like a few years back, I would put the whole thing under one base color and then color the hair as like almost like an individual object, which kind of throws me off, because I feel like I should have established the lighting right away so that I don't follow into that trap. And then I can also gradually shift my shadows to look more appropriate to each of the objects, just because like the highlight on the right side, where it's going to be the most brightest, is going to look way too intense and have too much contrast if I put that same highlight maybe on the center or even on the left side. So it's just something to take into consideration if you know you're going to follow into that trap, like I do sometimes. Kind of like tangent. I do want to draw more of the Sumeru characters a little bit more. I'm really liking rendering a lot of the gold objects recently. So I think I talked about this before too, when I drew Candace and maybe Sino at some point. I had a lot of fun drawing kind of rendering and picking out like shadow colors, reflective light, highlights and stuff for a lot of the gold pieces, because I think it's really fun to do. So maybe I'll draw a lot more of the Sumeru characters again. There's still some that I haven't drawn yet. I haven't drawn Dory. I haven't technically drawn Kale yet. I've done a few sketches of her, I think. Actually, yeah, I think for Kale, maybe I'll save it for a different video. I don't know if I'm gonna keep the sketch. It's like floating around in my folder in my Procreate app, but I kind of want to save the concept for another video because I think it could be fun. So I'll talk about it at some other point, but I definitely want to draw more people with like the gold accessories and stuff because it's definitely fun to render metal, because I don't render metal that much. I render mostly like cloth. And recently I've been drawing like Kaida Haru from Nijisan GGP, and his new outfit has kind of like that holographic, is it holographic? It might be iridescent. I'm not too sure which material it is. Oh, here he is actually right here. You can see like on his coat, jacket, the little flaps or whatever, that's kind of like the white area. They had its like rainbow color through it. I think it's iridescent. But I want to do some more like material practice if I can, and I love doing this like via fan art because practice can be monotonous sometimes, and actually letting it contribute to a piece can be very fun, even though that could be also like a little bit of a setback or a little bit of a distraction because you're not putting your full focus on practicing just that one thing. You're kind of putting it towards like everything, which might be a bad thing. Just kind of tailor your learning to your own learning style if you know it. But yeah, I decided to return back to drawing Dehya, and apologies that the lighting shift changed a bit. I decided to film right after I finished a call with my friends, so this is in the middle of the night. I tried to adjust it to go back to what it was because I didn't know that it was kind of that different, because usually for like my mic and my webcam, my mic is on my left side and my webcam is coming from the right side. And when I have a call with my friends on Discord, I have it usually on the opposite so that my webcam is on my right, above my laptop, so that when I look at my friends on my laptop screen, it looks like I'm looking at my webcam, so it actually feels natural. So that is, what am I saying? That is why I didn't realize that the settings were kind of weirdly changed. Because if I don't change my settings and I just use the webcam on myself with the same settings that I use to record videos, I will look very orange and a little bit blown out, I guess that makes sense. Yeah. So my brain's like having a hard time catching up with what I'm trying to think about. So yeah, I kind of took a break from working on her, which I think I needed. I did work on her for the entire day, basically, kind of like in little snippets. So I think I did 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours-ish prior to the call. And then I took about 2-hour break because my call with them was about 2.5 hours, I think. And during that time, I was working on that Kaida illustration because I can't film if I'm using the same webcam to talk to my friends, so I might as well work on self-indulgent art in the meantime. And then when I returned back, I think it was just another 2-3 hours, I think. It might be 3 hours because I think this is a 5-hour drawing. So, Okay, so let's talk about process since the video caught up. I did change the line work color or the sketch color to match certain areas to make it appear a little bit softer. After that, I merged my sketch layer and my coloring layer together, and this is not merged with my background layer so that I can still have free reign on just adjusting the figure itself without tampering with the background. I made a new layer, set it to addition, and I did a little bit of the light source, and then I'm setting another layer set to multiply and clipping it once again, and I'm gonna drop in a larger kind of cooler shadow just to set her into the environment a little bit better. But because it's a little bit too intense, I'm gonna knock back the opacity, and I kind of want her skin to still have that warmth, especially near her face, so I'm gonna erase a little bit there and kind of like near the right side because that is going to be hitting the light a little bit more easily, so I wanted to keep the warmth there. After that, I merged them in order, so I merged the multiply layer down onto the merged layer, and then the addition or add layer, which has all my highlights, merge down to the merge layer as well. And then now that I have Dehya kind of on one layer, we can actually go in and start to render and to clean up everything. So, I don't know if it's like, when was the last time I've done a video like this? It might have been an ASMR video, or actually I don't remember. I felt a little bit rusty doing the rendering on camera because for the most part I move a lot when I draw. I feel like when I'm drawing on my iPad, so like sometimes I would bump the iPad, I would shift the iPad so that my arm is on the full desk, or fully on the desk, or sometimes I would lean back in my chair and I would prop my iPad on my knees, if that makes sense, so it's a little bit more comfortable. And sometimes I feel a little bit strained or a little awkward when I have to film and trying to make sure I don't knock my iPad out of frame too much. I do it here and there, so like every so often, so I do apologize if the shifting does bother people, or the fact that sometimes the screen isn't aligned properly with the edges. Oh yeah, I took another break, I think. I don't really remember what I went to do. Maybe I went to play Core Keeper or something. But basically, because I exited out of my recording program, I had to readjust the lighting once again. So apologies that the lighting changed for like the third or fourth time probably. But yeah, here's the gold areas. I think my favorite part is the gold that's on her neck, as well as the gold on her fingers. I had a lot of fun doing a lot of like the smaller, finer details that I could kind of pull out the highlights, because I think adding highlights right against some of the parts that have shadow just makes it look super crisp. I think hopefully I show it here. Maybe? Yes, here. It just makes the edge look a little bit sharper, a little bit cleaner, and looks pretty in my opinion. So yeah, I did that for all the little metal parts of her fingers so that it kind of looks a little bit more like metal. I don't know, metal is very cool to play around with in terms of like color, because I feel like gold can be like difficult to render, or even just like choose out colors for gold, because I feel like when you think of the color gold, I think most people probably think of something similar, but then when you're shading, I feel like a lot of people would gravitate towards using just like golds and gradually getting darker and more saturated. But I love adding a little bit of that muted brownish green in there. It just makes it look a little bit more authentically gold rather than like that silly fake gold, if that makes sense, or just like even just like a yellow orangey object. So yeah. Adding purples help, I think, too. Maybe it's because like I like adding purple and muted greens to a lot of like warmer objects if I can, because I feel like it helps with making things look a little bit more natural. While when I'm like doing some, I guess like white objects, I tend to gravitate towards like browns and blues and purples. But like a lot of warmer objects, purples, actually I use a lot of purple now that I'm thinking about it. I use purple in the skin, a lot of the shading. Purple is just, I don't know, maybe it's like a versatile color for me, because I see it in a lot of areas, like for the hair even, or sometimes in the eyes. I use it for in place of grays a lot of the time, as well as just like in the gold area you can see, in the skin you can see it. I don't know. I always say my favorite color is blue, but I feel like I have a lot of purple objects too. Even my desk mat currently is purple, has purple whales on it, even though I was eyeing the blue one. The purple one's very cute though. And it kind of matches my mouse, because my mouse has the purple light for now. Enough rambling. What else? Yeah, I think for the most part, if I'm doing some draw with me's, I might do a redraw here or there, because I always cringe looking at some of my old Genshin prints and drawings, and I would like to update them if I can. And they're just like a lot of characters I'd really do like in Genshin, which is why I want to redraw them, because I want to do them justice, but also because it's just fun to draw them, and if I can, I will try to draw and record the process for you guys. Yeah, I think it'd be fun to do another redraw my own fan art, but in, what is it called? Start to finish format? Because I think it's been a while since I've done a start to finish, but also I think it'd be interesting to see how I approach it differently from how I done it from the past. So I'll definitely take that in consideration. Okay, for the last little parts of Dehya, so I have the little particles. I feel like this is kind of like a staple for me. So I'm just using the selection tool, making random kind of leaf little geometric shapes here and there, kind of just flowing across her. And then we'll go ahead and use the Gaussian blur and motion blur to kind of create a little bit of movement. I wanted to treat this a little bit more like dust particles rather than petals, where I usually do that. And you can see that I kind of added in a bit of like a dust cloud whooshing by, and I kind of wanted that because I kind of wanted to put something in the foreground that wasn't just like lighting per se, and I feel like this kind of helps set her a little bit back a bit. I don't know, I think it just frames the character a little bit better too. So yeah, it'll just be a little bit of adjusting, and then afterwards I wanted to add a little bit more particles here and there. I was gonna make these dust particles like super fine dust, but I don't know why I used the selection tool. I feel like if I added in with my brush, it would have sufficed. And I kind of flip-flop between making them darker and lighter, just so we have a variation of dust, but I opted that I would just blur them and make them not very apparent. So last thing, I'm gonna create a more sense of depth for the whole piece. So I kind of duplicated everything after grouping them. I merged a new group, and then I set it to... No, I went to Gaussian blur to make sure that I blurred it a little bit before I start to erase, and make sure that kind of like her face and kind of the right side of her kind of sticks out a little bit more, while everything else kind of blurry and a little bit feathered out. Yeah, I think that's it for the process of Dehya. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's drawing. I know it's been quite a while since I've done kind of a draw with me session on the iPad like this, so hopefully we'll get back into doing some like this again. And hopefully you guys enjoyed today's drawing, because I actually really like how she turned out. I definitely want to draw like an action pose or scene for her next time. But yeah, I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!